Hey guys, I'm Potato, and this is Potato Reads Reddit. Today we have an amazing, if not long, story about an individual who takes on a strata and a property management company and wins. Alright guys, so let's get right into it today. If you like our content, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and that notification bell as well if you feel like it. And let's get right into the stories. Alright. And our first story is from Serena Usagi. HOA mistakes me for my cousin's wife. Back when I was 18, I'm 26 female now, I was helping my cousin, 30 male, and his newlywed wife, 25 female, move into their new home that has an HOA. I was carrying boxes into the house, and I was covered in sweat. As I was enjoying some rest with a bottle of water, one of the HOA members came up to me and introduced himself. We exchanged pleasantries and then asked, "How long have you and your husband been married?" After that, I told him to please wait and brought in the actual married couple to meet the HOA member. They came out and the man's face dropped. Then, he faked a phone call from the HOA and left. We didn't know anything was wrong at the time. Not even a week after they moved in, I get a call on my cell phone from my cousin. He said that the police were raiding his house for possible drugs. I know my cousin. He has a criminal record of a Boy Scout. Every time he gets a prescription for painkillers, he either shreds the note or dumps the pills in the toilet due to fear of addiction. The police found nothing and left. They did apologize. The very next day, his wife was stopped by the police in her own driveway. They said that she was a suspect for prostitution, even though she was wearing a pantsuit from her job as a cardiologist. They called her hospital to confirm her whereabouts, and she was let go. The police came back the day after someone claimed that his wife was breaking into their own home. How can someone break into their home through the front door with their own keys? After a month, the HOA came up to them claiming that they are a nuisance and attempted to put a lien on the house for so many calls to the police. Luckily, my cousin's brother is a lawyer and fought against the lien in court. At court, the HOA member that met the couple on day one was revealed to be the one that sent the cops after them so they could be kicked out of the neighborhood. As it turns out, that person testified that he didn't want their kind in his perfect neighborhood. Everyone in that room was dumbstruck. The HOA lawyer immediately dropped the case, apologized to my cousin and his wife. That HOA member was kicked out of the neighborhood for racism. As it turns out, he also called the police on every black and brown person that even passed by his house. Since then, they moved out of the neighborhood after she got a better job offer in her field. I forgot to say, she is black, my cousin is white. Alright, that's it for the story. Let's read some of the top comments. Wrong Explanation 48 says, "That's what HOAs are for. No surprise there, sorry." And Sean BZA says, "Sounds like your lawyer cousin can get a 6-figure settlement out of the HOA and this person for abuse of power. As you are out of the HOA, this is a perfect revenge, as the HOA member will go after the ex-HOA member for the costs of the case, as he was definitely contravening some federal law, and the shield of the HOA law does not cover him anymore. Slam dunk case there, with the judge as witness to him uttering this in a courtroom?" And OP replies to that saying, "That member was the only one to do this. The other board members didn't know he was racist until his 'their kind' remark." And that's it for that story and the comments. Why don't you tell us what you thought down in the comments below, and we'll move on to our next story. Our next story was posted by a homeowner Phil. HOA Karen raided my house for toilet paper, disinfectant, and hand sanitizer. This happened over a year ago during the height of the pandemic in mid-2020. I'm 29 male, and I'm a homeowner. I bought a house in 2019 from my uncle because he was well set and wanted to retire to his second home by a lake. Before buying the house, my uncle warned me that the neighborhood has an HOA, but it only affects those who joined it, and my uncle did not. But the price my uncle was offering was half the home's value. I couldn't pass up the offer. So I bought a house in an HOA neighborhood that wasn't a part of the HOA. Right after I moved in, I got a knock at the door, and when I opened it, I was greeted by an older woman with short graying blonde hair and face covered in thick makeup, and was holding a welcome to the neighborhood gift basket. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA, then asked to come in so she could help me fill out some forms. I knew what she was trying to do because my uncle warned me she did this to every new homeowner in the area who wasn't part of the HOA. So I quickly and bluntly stated I was not going to join her HOA. Her smile quickly disappeared and she started saying that I did not have a choice as all new homeowners are mandated to join. I told her I knew in advance that that was a total lie, and that I will not be paying any dues or fines, and will be ready to call a lawyer if I have to. She called me a thorn to the neighborhood and said she'd be back, though we did not speak to each other for some time. I expected her to start sending me fines in the mail, but the most I usually got were letters stating that the grass was getting too tall or my driveway needed sweeping. Those never bothered me because they are normal home chores and need to be done regularly anyway. But several neighbors that were on the HOA's side made it clear they didn't like me because I didn't join, just like my uncle. I said that was fine. We're neighbors, but we don't have to be friends. They said that was fine too because I'm an outsider and they'll never accept me until I join the HOA. Later, in early 2020, I got word from a friend that people were starting to buy a lot of disinfectant, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer en masse. I decided the best option was to order these things online. I got 8 big 12 packs of toilet paper, a case of 20 bottles of hand sanitizer, 3 boxes of disposable latex gloves, a couple of boxes of disposable face masks, and a case of 20 large cans of name brand disinfectant spray. I set the order for delivery to be signed for only as I did not trust anyone not to steal my packages if they were just left on my porch. When the packages were delivered, several neighbors saw me getting lots of toilet paper and some other packages that contained the other stuff. And just because I'm a paranoid guy, I still bought more of the same stuff when I saw it in stores, like those small cheap 4-packs of toilet paper or off-brand disinfectant spray. I bought them because I had a feeling some friends or family might need some soon, and I was right. As expected, toilet paper, disinfectant, and sanitizer pretty much disappeared from store shelves for miles around, and people were fighting over and hoarding it. Meanwhile, I've got a very generous supply that I still haven't come close to using up. Though word of my supply got around fast when people started needing some, a friend of mine ran out of toilet paper and had no hand sanitizer, so I gave him a couple of generic 4-packs of TP and a bottle of sanitizer at my door. A few family members ran out too, and I shared with them as well. They were all extremely grateful, but I ended up with several neighbors knocking on my door and asking to buy my supply or wanting handouts. But I refused and said I only gave some of what I had away to friends and family. And they made it pretty clear to me before that we'd never be friends since I refused to join the HOA. So if I were to give some to one neighbor, they'd all want my supplies, and then I'd run out really fast. They didn't like this and harassed me several times from the sidewalk, but I just ignored them. Later, the HOA Karen showed up at my door and told me several neighbors had run out of all the items that this post is about. Then said she wasn't asking, but demanding I share my stock with my neighbors to set a good example. I told her to buzz off because that had nothing to do with me. I may be a jerk, but I'm a well-prepared jerk, and I've read her HOA bylaws online. So even if I was a member of her HOA, which I was not, I wouldn't have to give my stock away either. She left while yelling at me that one day I'd regret not being a good neighbor or being a part of her HOA. The next time I went to work, I was notified around noon by the cameras I had at my house that there was a thief breaking into my home. I could see video of them on my smartphone, and it looked like a woman in a spandex suit with her face covered by a hockey mask. I called the police immediately and was allowed to clock out at work so I could rush home. Right around the time I got there, the cops were walking HOA Karen out in handcuffs to a police cruiser. She'd broken into my home by using a crowbar to force open the back door and was tossing all of my toilet paper and any other supplies she could grab out into my backyard, where her kids were picking it up and bagging it. I pressed charges, and HOA Karen got 6 months in jail and probation. HOA Karen's husband called me to apologize for his wife and told me that he had been planning a divorce for a while because this isn't the first time she's been in trouble with the law. And CPS got involved too because she was using her kids to help her steal from me. So he was going to file for full custody in the divorce. HOA Karen didn't return, and someone new was elected HOA president in her place. Her husband didn't move, and I see him from time to time. and there's no hard feelings between us. And yes, he did get full custody of his kids because his wife had a longer history with the law than I thought. We're sort of friends now, too, as we've occasionally had a beer together, and he helped me replace my back door that his ex broke. I'm making this post more than a year later because I just saw HOA Karen again. I was visiting some friends in another city and saw her working at the local supermarket, there bagging groceries. As soon as we saw each other, she obviously recognized me because she scowled and refused to look at me again the entire time I was there. Karma is a real witch, isn't it, Karen? Alright, that's it for the main story. Now let's read some comments. The first comment is from Grode22. This is glorious. I love that the cops got there in time, and I'm glad the husband was on your side. And OP responds to that saying, I'm glad too, but honestly the pandemic just brought out the worst in people. But the whole situation made some neighbors stop being cold to me at least, and the new head of the HOA hasn't bothered me at all. Okay, that's all for the relevant comments, and the only one that OP responded to, so why don't you tell us what you think down in the comments below, and we'll move on to the next story, which is a long one, so buckle in. Our next story is from Mirewood91. Petty revenge transforms an HOA and causes a property manager to get fired. For context, I live on the west coast of Canada and we do not have HOAs in my province. It's like a state. However, we do have stratas, which are essentially the same thing. A building strata is a duplex or condominium building where units inside the building are individually owned by a strata corporation, which is formed to take care of the common property assets. Example, hallways, parking lot, roof, etc. Most have property managers who take care of arranging maintenance, contractors, vehicle towing, garbage disposal, etc. A bare land strata is a little different and looks like a typical single-family neighborhood. The units are the individual strata lots, and the common property would typically consist of the strata road, which may look like a public road, streetlights, underground water and sewer infrastructure, and common amenity areas like clubhouses, gardens, etc. Most have property managers as well. Of the two types of stratas, bare land stratas are often the ones that have more issues as property owners may assume that their common assets, example roads, are owned by the city, and they don't maintain them, which leads to failure of common property infrastructure. There are a few recent cases where a bare land strata never invested any money in maintaining their underground sewer and water infrastructure, and it failed, costing each owner upwards of $25,000. They often demand that the local government use taxpayer dollars to bail them out, but 9 times out of 10, this tactic doesn't work. The background. I worked in local government when I was younger and dealt with my fair share of bare land strata corporations demanding that the government enforce the strata's rules or take over their infrastructure. Once I had saved enough money to buy a home, I was determined not to live in a bare land strata. Unfortunately, I could only afford a condo, so I had to buy into a building strata. It was a little quirky. The original property was one large lot that was developed into 4 condos with a shared driveway and common fountain sitting areas. In my opinion, the city should have required that each building be on the same strata plan, but they didn't, so pieces of the driveway were owned by different buildings, and there were legal easements to allow the other building to use the driveway. I was in Building D, see sketch, which was landlocked, and needed access through Building B's and A's land to get to the public road. While there was a legal easement, enforcing the easement would have to be done through the courts if relations between building stratas went sour. And here we have a lovely paint diagram of the way the buildings are set up. You see the city road, the driveway, the blue circle, which I assume is the fountain, and the 4 buildings. Observations. My unit had a prime view of the parking lot, which only had 4 visitor parking stalls. In my first week, I noticed that folks from building A, B, and C were using our visitor stalls, meaning that family and friends couldn't visit me or the other occupants of my building who owned this portion of the parking lot. I had been told by occupants of buildings A, B, and C that there was a zero-tolerance policy if my guests parked on their land. So I was a little annoyed when my friends couldn't visit and I reached out to the property manager. The property manager advised that the management company does not enforce parking. The parking guy who did was a volunteer and has moved away. The setup. There's me, D-Bag Drivers, DD, the Strata Council, and the property manager. When I moved in, I was going to have a friend over, who was surprising me with a housewarming gift. This was going to be a challenge as there were only 4 visitor spots shared between the 36 units in our building. Also, due to the landlocked status of my building, some people had trouble finding the entrance between building A and B. My friend called me and was having trouble finding the driveway, so I went out to meet them. On my way to the road, I saw that each of the visitor stalls was full, but the folks, D-Bag Drivers, who just parked in the last spot were headed towards building A. I got their attention and pointed to the sign, "Parking for Building D only," and asked if they could move because I had company on the way. They told me to bug off and walked away. My friend was able to find parking a block away and walked to my building to visit, but I was a little annoyed and called up the property manager to see if they could deal with the DDs. He informed me that only the Strata president can authorize a tow, and he's out of town, so I was out of luck. The story. I decided to attend the Strata Council meeting to see if I could get a copy of the bylaws and to get an idea of how the council functioned. Property manager. Since the parking guy, also a council member, has moved, we don't have enough council members to hold a meeting. Strata Council, 2 ladies. Who's the new guy? If he's an owner, he can be on the council, and then we have enough people to hold a meeting. Property manager. Looks to me. Are you an owner? Me. Yes. Property manager. Great, you're the vice president of council now. Let's get this meeting started. Me, very confused. Okay. The meeting was a little dull. It was focused on finances and addressing complaints received by different unit owners, mostly about noise and parking. Since I identify myself as the guy who asked about the parking issue, afterwards the property manager gave me the parking notices and a copy of the bylaws. I was instructed to leave a warning on a windshield if there's any overnight parking, and call the president for a tow the next time they parked. After the meeting, I went back to my unit and looked at the rules and bylaws. While we could tow the folks using our stalls and clearly visiting other buildings, the rules around how long legitimate visitors could stay were unclear, and it didn't appear to prohibit owners from parking their second vehicles in the visitor stalls. However, the Strata president had been towing for these offenses. The next week, the DDs were back and once again used our parking area when visiting other buildings. Me places the warning on their windshield. DDs, what the F are you doing? Me, you can't park here unless you're visiting someone from our building. There's only 4 stalls to share between the 36 unit owners, and you've taken the last one. DDs, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Me, the Strata president may tow now that we've given you the warning. DDs laughs and walks away. When I send the photo of the car and license plate to the Strata president, he informed me that he knows the DDs and not to give them a hard time. I called up the property manager, who reiterated that only the Strata president can authorize a tow. This was complete nonsense, as the bylaws and rules did not state this, but I held my tongue and formulated a plan. Several months later, the annual general meeting was held, and the Strata president was not present. Apparently he had sold his place but kept his title until the meeting, as no one wanted to do his job. I put my name forward for president and was voted in unanimously by the residents, mostly because no one else wanted the job. Sure enough, the DDs were back within a week, once again parking in the visitor stall. Me places the warning on their windshield. DDs, that's a waste of paper, we're not going to get towed. Me, if you leave this car and go to one of the other buildings, the Strata president is going to call for a tow. DDs laughed, whatever man, and walked away. I waited about 15 minutes and then called for a tow. DDs had to call a cab and never came back. Now that my petty revenge was complete, I decided to look into the Strata's rules and bylaws and see what sort of fixes were needed. While the rules stated that legitimate visitors and owners who abused the Strata's visitor parking were in contravention of the bylaw did not explain what an abuse was, and it was wide open for interpretation. I knew that if I called to tow any vehicle, I would be liable if there was a court dispute, and not the property management company, who should have been managing the parking as it was in their contract. Generally speaking, in the case of a dispute, a judge would determine the interpretation, and they don't often find in favor of stratas. But the courts do look at if enforcement has been consistent. Example, if we have a log of every time this car broke the rules, we have records of placing warnings, and notes about what we considered a violation, we might get a favorable ruling from a judge. Unfortunately, the notices were vaguely written, and the property manager did not have this information as, according to him, only the strata president can authorize a tow. I'm not the president, I'm just the property manager. I brought my concerns to the property manager and suggested that we change the rules to cover off our liability and ensure fairness and consistency to the parking issue. Property manager: what's the matter? Me: I'm not comfortable enforcing the parking rules. Our rules aren't clear. Property manager: those are the rules and you volunteered to help. Me: we should change the rules then. Property manager: that's going to take a lot of work. Just enforce the rules as they are written. Later that night, the property manager sent me a follow-up email explaining that my role was to hand out parking notices and not to challenge the rules and bylaws. Cue malicious compliance. I decided that I would rewrite the parking notices to read something along the lines of, Notice: it is suspected that this vehicle is parking in violation with the strata bylaws. Your license number has been recorded and will be towed by property management company. If you think this notice was issued in error, please reach out to our property manager's email. I gave any vehicle parking overnight a notice, but never called for a tow. Within a month, caused 80 plus calls to the property management company with complaints and concerns. Property manager: what's going on? Why am I getting all these calls? Me: I've been handing out notices, it's my role. Property manager: you should call the tow company if we have repeat offenders. Me: sorry, that's not my role. My role is to hand out notices. Property manager: what? No, you need to tow. Who told you to just hand out notices? Me: send screenshot from property manager noting that my role was to hand out parking notices and follow the rules as they are written. Property manager hangs up the phone. The property manager realized that I would never call a tow truck. Ironically, making the notices threats vague caused many of the folks from other buildings to stop using our parking lot because they believed the threat. Word got around that I was to thank for this, and people were grateful. At our council meeting, 3 months after the annual general meeting, I welcomed the new council and started the meeting. Prior to the meeting, I had gone through the strata's contract with the property management company and found a few interesting tidbits of information. Property manager: I'm happy to go over the annual budget. Before I do, does anyone have topics for tonight? Me: I'd like to go through these. Drops binder on the table. Property manager, visibly confused: what are those? Me: these are our bylaws and rules, and frankly they are out of date and vague. Property manager: I think that's a little harsh. The rules are fine. Me: drops second binder on the table. Property manager, visibly more confused: what are those? Me: I've spoken to every unit owner to see if they understand our bylaws, and they don't, and the interpretation of our bylaws is all over the board. Property manager: it can't be that bad. Give me an example. Me: well, parking is an issue, and our bylaws say you can't abuse the visitor parking stalls. Some residents think that an abuse is anything more than 30 minutes, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days, a weekend, a week, etc. We could find ourselves in deep trouble if the property management company starts towing. Property manager: only the strata president can authorize a tow. Me: hands out paper. Actually, your contract says that you will take care of the parking enforcement. Also, holds up phone. Here's a screenshot from you clearly noting that my role is to hand out parking notices and to follow the rules as they are written. Nowhere in our rules does it say that only the strata president can authorize a tow. If you aren't going to fulfill your contract, we should find another property management company. Property manager, visibly panicked: okay, we'll take over parking enforcement. We don't need to change the bylaws for that, do we? Me: yes, we do. If you tow and we lose in court, the strata has to cover your court fees. Property manager: fine, we'll update the parking rules. Me: no, we have to redo the entire bylaws. Here's some other rules that are out of date which none of the residents agree on the interpretation. We continue to walk through the bylaws line by line, and everyone realizes how archaic they were. Property manager. Okay, you've made your point. These bylaws need to be updated. We can hire a lawyer to draft the new bylaws, but that's going to take some time, and we'll need to approve at least $10,000 to allow for the lawyers to draft the bylaws, and account for revisions if the owners want changes. This will also have to wait until the next annual general meeting. Me drops a third binder on the table. Property manager. No longer visibly confused, just looks like he has a headache. Sigh. What are those? Me. I've actually gone and drafted a new set of bylaws to replace these garbage ones. If you go through the residents' comments in the second binder, you'll see that there's some common ground on what people do think would be reasonable if we had an opportunity to change the rules. These draft bylaws address all those comments. Property manager. Okay, well, we should still budget $8,000 then. Me cutting him off. No, it shouldn't cost us a dime. Your contract with our strata says that your company will provide legal services in the form of vetting new rules and conducting bylaw reviews and updates on a 5-year basis, and this is covered in our monthly fees. When was the last time a review was undertaken? Property manager. I'm not sure. I'll need to look at our records. Me. Well, the bylaws are from 2006, and our contract with you started in 2007. Property manager. Looks defeated. Okay, we can conduct the bylaw review in 3 months so that the new bylaw is ready for the next annual general meeting. I want to move on with a review of our annual budget and move on. Does the president have anything else to add before I do? I had expected this. Part of the contract with the property management company included a clause that the company could, within a month's notice, cancel their contract with no penalty provided that they completed any works currently directed by council, provided that the work could be reasonably done within that month. I imagine that this clause was in place so that if anyone ever attempted to take advantage of the legal services, the management company could withdraw their services and claim that since the bylaw reviews were scheduled in 3 months and therefore could not be reviewed within the 1-month period. Me. Before we move on, I think we should adopt these new bylaws as rules. This will allow us to enforce parking problems right away, and the legal review of the rules can be done within a few weeks. Property manager. Panicking. We can't do that. Rules are different from bylaws. Me. If you read the Strata Property Act, the main difference between rules and bylaws are the fines you can apply to them. Also, the rules have to be voted on at the next AGM, so this is a good opportunity to test them out while also getting that legal review. Strata Council, 2 ladies. We like that idea. Let's vote. We got the legal review completed by the management company within a few weeks, and they were later adopted as bylaws at the annual general meeting. The 2 ladies who had been on Strata Council since 2007 realized that they hadn't been getting the best value for the contract with the property manager and put forward a motion to end our contract and hire the property management company who deals with the other buildings in our area who had a much better reputation. Holy, that was quite the story, wasn't it? Well, I'd love to hear what you guys have to think in the comments below. Personally, I love this story. I love the petty revenge. I love the malicious compliance. It was very satisfying, the ending. Yeah, it was a good story. But I want to hear from all of you guys as to, what you think of this story. Well, that's all we have for today, guys. I'd like to thank you for spending some time with us. If you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you feel like it. Alright, thank you for spending your time with me, and you have a great day. Bye!